right now, I'm going to introduce Carl's James Hendricks with Whatcom County, Washington. He's going to present on a bridge of many elements.
It's funny. Most people may not know, but I'm literally 70 miles south of the Canadian border, so I've come a little ways to do this today. And as I got here about an hour, actually about 2 hours ago, I got a call that we had a propane tank blow up underneath one of our bridges. So lots of things going on. I got bid openings happening today too, so I'm a pretty busy person, so as things go. So I'm going to discuss a bridge of many elements. Basically, it's actually two structures, but they have to work together in order to work. So you'll see a gamut of many things on this presentation because I'm doing it on a ferry landing, which most people don't have ferries. So it's a little different than most bridges, but it's got a lot of the same elements, same issues, same problems. We just add other problems to our bridge. Am I using the mouse? Oh, there we go. Okay, I just wanted to kind of give just a general background because there are a number of operations across the country for ferries. And there's basically about 190 of them across the country that have ferry services. There's basically around 500 terminals that I could find in 37 states. And then there's 3 territories that have ferries. Ferry fleets, there's 700 active vessels across the country. Ranging from a boat that carries 6,000 people to one that carries 2. So you can imagine 2 for the cost of ferries. I'm not going to really go into cost in this because you don't want to know what you're paying for ferries. It's horrible. There's 350 routes covering, basically about just a little over 8,000 nautical miles, give or take. The largest route for ferries is Alaska. They have one that leaves from Bellingham and goes clear up to Skagway and goes up to Anchorage, and you can get from Anchorage and go all the way up to Dutch Harbor. It takes a few days to do that, but it's a ferry system. The Washington State, where I'm from, we have the largest ferry system. We actually have 21 vessels that operate, and it keeps the state very busy. I know that they're multi-million dollars. We subsidize that system for that state, so that gives you an idea. They're not cheap. If you were to ask me if you wanted to build a bridge or put a ferry in, I'll tell you to build a bridge without any question. If you can do it, build a bridge. And then in Washington, we have 5 counties, which I'm one of them, that have ferries. Most of them are up on the Puget Sound area. We have one down on the Columbia River. These are our 2 docks. The one I'm going to be discussing is at Gooseberry Point, which is the one to the left. The one on the right, you can see there's a large crane. It's actually bigger than our ferry. That was this last summer's project. This is our ferry that we currently have running and operating. We are currently in design for a brand new ferry that's twice this size. So we're going from a 16 to 20 car to almost a 50 car ferry. So it's twice the length of this boat that we currently have. It was built in Bellingham. This boat came into service in 1962. So it's over 60 years old now. It's got so much paint on it, when you actually go to the shipyard and they start to scrape it, it's almost to a 1/4 inch thick of paint on this boat because we don't sandblast it down. It costs way too much. It's crewed by 3 people, and I actually refer to this thing as the battering ram. This ferry has done more damage to more structure than anything. You always get those late calls and you find out that it goes through the dolphins, it goes through the breakwater, it goes into the whaler, or whatever it may be. It's always something. With that, the boat only drafts about 5 feet of water, even though it has a 9-foot height. It only carries, like I said, about 16 cars, especially if you put a truck on it. One semi-truck with a trailer takes one whole side. And the ferry, it's so tiny that when you're in your car, if you have to get out if it's sinking, you better roll down your window. You cannot open your door. So that's another reason for why we're getting a new ferry. So these are our approach span. The approach span was rebuilt in 82. It's 23 feet wide from curb to curb. It's 158 feet long. It's got a number of timber bents. This is the first structure to the next structure. Basically, your elements on it are your typical rails. They're timber. It's all timber, this whole entire structure. We got treated timber, which now I'm no longer allowed to use over water, which is an interesting problem. And the deck on this thing has been replaced, so we're working on the third time right now, since the time it was built. Superstructure is just girders, timber girders. They're pretty good size. The hole we cut through the deck so we can replace that girder, and then we replace the decking, of course. That girder I brought up on my personal truck because we couldn't get our crews down to get it, and we were waiting for months, and it was an emergency. So that's the kind of things we do. The substructure on this is, some of it's the original structure before the rebuild. And this structure was built, I do believe the only information I could find, it was built in the early 40s, most of this timber structure. So that bent of all those piles has got added piles. Some of the original piles from the original structure are in there. And you can see that we get the hollow piles from the marine growth on the bottom, or worms and things like that. Cross bracing, I just want to put in there, this is the fourth time. This is the third time since I started with the county we've replaced this cross bracing. It does not last very long. Even being treated, it tends to, with logs that are in our water, hitting it and damaging it, it's just continually a problem for us. And it's amazing when this stuff is not in there how much the structure moves. It wiggles pretty bad. The other items on this particular structure is electrical, which you can see is hanging. We're always fixing things like that. We get logs that rip it down. And then we have a gate on it. The other thing we provide to our people on the island, they just love us for this, is we provide a free car wash. And I'm going to see if this works. I had to take the sound off because it was so windy that day. But you'll see it start shooting through. Those railings are 4 feet high, just to kind of give you a height of the water. And if you're a walk-on passenger, you have to run across that too. So, and this dock faces south, and that's our prevailing wind, so it usually gets pretty bad in there. You can always tell a new islander too. They always got a pretty car. All the islanders that have lived there a while, their car is not in good shape because we are over saltwater. So the next part of the structure, like I said, the timber one feeds this one. So you really, it's one giant facility, but they're two different structures. This one was built in 1986, and it's a steel transfer structure. And I'm just kind of wanted to show you what it looked like coming as you're coming on the ferry in on the right-hand side there, or left-hand side, sorry. And the right-hand side is, of course, a elevation view of it. The decking, it's asphalt over laminated timber, and it's got steel handrails, guardrails, timber curbs, and it's 24 feet wide. This asphalt I've replaced twice, and it's ready to be replaced again, because when you're paving over laminated timber, it doesn't last. It's just constantly breaking up. Then we got to deal with, of course, we got fracture critical, which no longer called fracture critical, but sorry, you'll hear me say that because I'm still trying to get used to the new one. But we have two steel main girders with floor beam stringers and cross bracing underneath. And we call it the pigeon condo. Every single cross member gusset plate has a pigeon nest on it. And we deal with them. They're heavy and they're thick. And I learned that you never see a baby pigeon because they don't leave until they are full grown. So you'll never see a baby pigeon. So they make a mess. Their guano rips apart our paint. So we're actually using a paint system under here. It's called coal tar, what they use on freighters, on big ships. Then the other parts of this thing, we have our apron, which is at the end of the transfer span. That's what's actually goes down onto the boat. So you can transition onto the boat. And it's got a bat wing system. It's really hard to see that in here. I don't know, can you see my mouse at all? Nope, that's all right. But it has pins that run all the way through there. You got pins at the other joints. So there's a lot of pins on this system. And then we have hydraulics on here. And our ferry crew, since they don't fix any of the problems, they like to make sure our maintenance crews stay busy. they put this ramp into the water quite often on us. I'm replacing those hydraulic arms twice a year. The salt water just tears them apart. Other elements on this transfer, you got your bearings up front up on the concrete cap. We've got a concrete cap with steel casings with concrete poured inside, and then of course, we have cathodic protection on all the steel piles out there. Even with all the cathodic protection, we're still having traces of electrolysis on the boat. So it's an interesting area. We haven't found the power source that's causing our problem yet. Got our head frame. Head frame is the upper structure. It's got the motor house up there that actually operates the transfer span up and down. And then we have concrete counterweights. There's 2 of them, one on each side. And they weigh about 22 tons. It was kind of funny the other night. I was working on my presentation a little bit, and my wife walked by. She looks down. She asked why we had a guillotine on our ferry. Kind of looks like it when you're there. We actually have hydraulic pumps, and they're inside another box for protection. So if they leak, we have our motor up top in the motor house. That little 5-horse motor operates this ramp up and down. You can see a little tiny nub on top of the motor. You actually hook a drill to that when this motor goes out. We can actually operate this ramp with a handheld drill. Yeah, but it's really slow. It just takes a long time. It goes down, the motor goes down to a gearbox, then goes to 2 shafts that go out to the running lines. Then we have, of course, like I said, we have these fracture critical members. The most interesting one is the live load hanger that's on your right-hand side. It's really hard to see it, but it's really bent. That's a common thing for us. This dock was built in a way that does not allow, when the pins are put in place, allows the transfer span to come up and allows that live load hanger to go up. It's fixed up top, so it just bends them. And every time we're bending, we're looking at $25,000 to get a new one. We've heat straightened them. Washington State's done a study. They heat straightened one of these live load hangers 100 times. They said it's still safe, but our county has elected not to go that route. We'll heat straighten it maybe once or twice, and then we replace it. I've replaced 6 in 23 years. So this is the top of that live load hanger. You got a pin that we UT. The interesting thing is we UT this pin, which is, important, but the setup is really interesting because this live load hanger goes up to a metal facet up there, which is welded to the I-beam. The I-beam goes across. It's bolted to 2 other tabs. So in reality, I think a lot of people don't realize, it's important to check that pin and pay attention to it, but it's all those weld connections too. You got to the tower, to the I-beam, the bolts, they got to be tight. If any of that stuff is not good, properly secured, the pin doesn't really matter. So it's important to actually look at the whole system on this one. Again, on this one, this is our transfer span. You can see the pin on the left-hand side there. It's actually pulled out right now. We UT that pin as well. Just above it, there's proximity switches. Our ramp, we can actually operate it from the ferry. You don't need personnel up on the dock to run this one. A lot of ferry systems have people up on the dock for a good reason. Usually when a person's on the dock, you don't have accidents. We have accidents quite often. We got lights that go on and everything. They still don't pay attention to the lights. So we're constantly having issues. Our dock is, with it running that way, you have to make sure all your lines and everything are adjusted correctly, because if it gets out of kilter, the pins will not go in the holes. So then it creates other problems. We got our small shiv down there. That runs our running lines. That goes up to the house up top. The cable, the big one, on the left-hand side, it's 1.5 inches in diameter, just to give you an idea. Up top, on top of the head frame, we've got our giant shivs up top. Those shivs are almost 4 foot in diameter, just to give you an estimate in size. We UT the shafts that go through each shiv. The other problem we've been having where the shivs are actually bolted to the head frame, they tend to crack on the pillow blocks there out of stress. So it's one area that we have to watch. The running line drum on next to it, that one is what runs the transfer span up and down. You see the shaft going out, and it goes over to the motor house. Things we really watch on this one is if the crew, you can see that there's a little bar up above and below. Those were added. What was happening is the crew would set the transfer span, they'd make the cables really loose, and then all of a sudden the cables would wrap over themselves, all this mess that you get up up there. So we put the bars, it helps keep the cable from jumping as much. And just some of the inspection considerations that we have on this dock. Time of year, we like to do it when it's dry, just because the seal is slippery. It's on a 24-month frequency, these two bridges are. Tides, we have to do it at a low tide and a high tide, just for access reasons. Low tide so we can see all the piles as much as we can, and then high tide so we can reach everything. Of course, ladders, need a boat, man lift on this particular structure. UT, fall gear, we have to wear when we're up in the upper structure, and then rain gear. The rain gear is not for rain, it's for all the grease. The dock is very greasy. And then, of course, schedule. Sometimes we have to change the ferry schedule, and people don't like their runs being canceled. Our ferry runs from 5:30 in the morning till 12:30 at night every day. So it's running constantly. And it takes about 4 hours to inspect it. And with all that running, our maintenance crews, they're greasing those cables every month. They're greasing pins. We're running the dock up and down, checking all our safeties that we do have, and running the hydraulics and running the backup generators that we have. And I just had a picture of the background. That's Mountain Baker and his sisters up there. And just real quick, these are the original ferry boats that were prior to the one I showed you earlier. The one on the left-hand side was a barge with a tug that pushed it across. This was in basically the 30s from what I can tell. And then on the one on the right-hand side, that's the Quina. That's the one that was just prior to the Chief. That one was like about a 9-car ferry, I think is what it could take, 9 cars at the time. And then that dock you see there below, that was the Gooseberry dock. That's what we replaced in 1986. That's what we had in 1986 was that dock there. And with that, I'd like to thank you. The ferry systems are very expensive. Whatcom County, we subsidize our ferry system $2 million a year. Just our ferry. So we recollect fees, our collection fees to pay for the operations. We can only collect 54% of the operating costs. That's our county code. So all the taxpayers in the county are paying for this. The biggest problem is there's nothing on the island for anyone to do. So these islanders will get pretty upset with us sometimes, but I have to remind them that this is a private driveway for them. And they forget that quite quickly. So we get yelled at the road. Try standing on a dock with them all coming by you. So yeah, it's very interesting at times. So again, I kind of started this to do something on elements, but the ferry system is a huge thing, so I could go on and on. So yeah, thank you.
Really interesting problems that you're dealing with there. Any thought on using like new mass timber that's coming out, like CLT or mass plywood panels as replacement for your solid sawn decking that's deteriorating over time?
We haven't yet. I know we would like to get federal funding, because the other thing I didn't tell you, this ferry, we're on tribal land. So that changes everything when we need to redo things. So we haven't pursued redoing that whole timber dock yet because of that, but it's in need. And when the new ferry comes on, probably in 5 years, that's going to be our next thing, trying to rebuild that timber structure. Because the other problem, the new lease we have with the tribe, they can kick us off anytime. So when you're trying to put millions of dollars to a landing, knowing that they can ask you to leave within the year, it's really tough. So you tend to just fix what you can, you keep it running. Because our lease is not up for another, I want to say 18 years. So we're really stuck with what we got for the most part. So
Thanks, Carl.